you have the most touchdown receptions for a rookie receiver in the 64-year history of the club?
I mean, that's huge, for the club. I didn't really, not necessarily, come just to break rookie records. There's a lot more on the table for me. And I'll eventually keep, clearing milestones as I go along.
Love, hate, pass catchers. That was Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice tops the love list for pass catchers here, Matthew, and sneaks in as a top 10 wide receiver for you against the Raiders this weekend.
Yeah, look, Rashee Rice over the last 4 weeks has been the 5th best wide receiver in fantasy, 30% target share in that stretch. He's had at least 7 receptions in all 4 games. It turns out that if you play with Patrick Mahomes and will actually catch the ball, good things can happen. What's nice is it feels like they finally have confidence in Rashee Rice to run all the routes. That his route tree is expanded enough that they can put him out there. 95% route participation in Week 15. I expect that continued against the Raiders this week. He's my wide receiver 8 in Week 16.
It's just felt for a while now if the ball isn't going to Kelsey, Rice, or Pacheco when he's healthy, just bad things happen in Kansas City, and now we're finally seeing that streamlined, particularly to Kelsey and Rice.
Did you see? It made the round of the internets, and I know you're very popular. You love going on the on the internets and the interwebs, like looking at what the hip kids
where's
do.
this going?
Did you see Taylor Swift? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but she's dating Travis Kelce, who plays for the Chiefs. So she attends a lot of the games, and there was a play where Travis Kelce just, they didn't go the Chiefs' way.
Yeah.
And they cut to Taylor Swift, and she said a word. She
said F-bomb?
Huh?
The little F-bomb from Taylor?
Yeah. I'm not good at reading lips. Can you tell me what she said there?
No, I can't tell you what it was, but I have an inclination that it's not a nice word, Matthew, and not really in tune with what she normally sings
Any
about.
ideas?
No, I'm 14 years old. I don't say curse words.
Oh, got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Was
Well,
she mad at the refs, or was she what was she mad at directly?
I don't know. I didn't watch that. I have filters on my social media so that any bad words get filtered out. So that's what I was asking you guys if you could tell me what she said.
I like that look from Taylor. I like it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, passion.
A different angle to her persona, so
right.
to speak.
Just a little bit of a bad girl.
Yeah,
just
I don't mind
more
it.
human.
Yep.
Exactly. When she said
whatever she said.
I think it was the word. Anyway, at any rate, so what I would say is that I feel like that's what Patrick Mahomes says when anyone goes to. It was a long way of saying that. I feel like if he doesn't throw it to Rashee Rice or Travis Kelce, I feel like that's what he says in his mind when he sees the ball bounce off of like MVS's hands, or Kadarius Toney's hand.
He seems like a man at the end of his tether, Patrick.
Yes.
And I think that's probably why he, after the Bills game,
Imploded.
kind of lost his mind.
Completely
I don't think that
imploded.
was about the offsides. I think that was about MVS against Philadelphia and Kadarius and Sky Moore against Detroit. I think it's all bubbling up for Patrick.
Yeah, I feel bad for him.
Kadarius did it again against the Patriots, by the
know.
way. Just
At some point, he's just not going to be there anymore, surely.
or
Yeah,
anywhere.
I think at some point it's potentially this week, but maybe this offseason. I don't know. Patrick's saying all the right things in the
as he does.
post-game presser, but anyway, start Rashee Rice this week, by the way. It'll be interesting to see if I get any pushback on, look, all I'm doing is quoting America's Sweetheart.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing.
Most famous person in the world.
Allegedly, she said that.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, allegedly.
She could have said that was bad luck.
Yeah.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
It was just a guess on my part.
All right. Next one, Jay. Mike Evans against Jacksonville. He's wide receiver 10 for Matthew. This Jacksonville secondary has been messy now for quite some time.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. One, Baker Mayfield playing at an above-average quarterback level pretty much all season now at this point, coming off the best game of his career against the Packers, effectively. Now he gets the Jags defense that just seems completely broken at the moment. The way that Joe Flacco was able to cook them, not to mention Lamar Jackson, they just don't, and Jake Browning as well had the game of his life against the Jags. They just don't have anything in the secondary.
Well, you think about how good Evans has been this year. And he was coming off of 2 seasons where he'd been a little bit down production-wise as well, right? I mean, he's now scored in 5 of his last 6 games. He's had 10 end zone targets over that stretch. And so you think about the production this year compared to the last 2 years. Jay, I think it's fair to say that Mike Evans is playing with the best quarterback of his career. Is that fair to say?
Tom Brady?
Not exactly fair.
I'm just saying. If you look at the numbers, I'm just saying.
Tom Brady, the year they won the Super Bowl?
I'm just saying, like the numbers with whoever that guy was.
Listen, if you
compared
stack up Baker's stats this year to Brady last year, It's not that different. Now, Brady had more volume, and I think Tom Brady's better, but still, Baker's playing at a really solid level.
No, I'm obviously joking. Obviously, Brady is the GOAT. He is the true greatest of all time. But Evans has had a ton of production with Baker Mayfield. There is some sort of connection there between the two of them. They've got this offense humming, and you mentioned the Jaguars secondary, which has been banged up and wasn't that good even when they were healthy. They have allowed the second most touchdown passes on deep passes this season. Only one team in the NFL has given up more deep touchdown passes this year than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So far this season, Mike Evans' average depth of target is 14.3 as well. And so Jacksonville, who has given up at least one touchdown in 13 of 14 games this year to a wide receiver and the fifth most touchdowns overall, should be a good day for Mr. Evans at the office. I have him as a top 10 play this week.
I personally rank Jameis's 30-30 season as my favorite Mike Evans quarterback one.
It's unbelievable.
He was chucking it.
He's produced with whatever quarterback it is. Do you think, here's my question, when they review this tape and they decide to fire me between now and tomorrow's show, do you think it'll be the F-bomb, or do you think it'll be the joke where I suggested that Baker Mayfield was better than Tom Brady?
That was way more off color.
Yeah, that's what I think so.
Exactly.
That's more offensive.
I would think so.
I would think so too. Like, whatever, you know.
You sitting in with HR and they're like, the Tom
I'm not sure
Brady
HR gets
insult.
past the first 10 seconds of the show where they see the shirt you're wearing.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is also
true.
arguably.
It is very sort of Skinamaxy. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, it's very,
Oh, boy. Okay.
So DJ Moore. DJ Moore's next here.
So
it's week 16. I'm punch drunk.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
3 weeks
Yeah,
to
you're
go
feeling like the
until
end
the
of Love
playoffs.
Hate.
I'm just, I can see the horizon.
One
I can
more?
see the end. I can
more
see the
love
end.
hate?
One more love hate. One last show. I don't know what it is. I don't know how it all ends for me. I just know that it's ending soon.
Yeah. Well, potentially one last hurrah this season for DJ Moore against the Cardinals. Not very good pass defense, 31st in the NFL. Since week 7, they just have nothing. They have no prayer. Now, I understand DJ Moore didn't do much against Cleveland, but no one does much against Cleveland. This is one of the best pass defenses of the past 20 years. Still goes 4 for 51, but I suspect with a much more favorable matchup with how Justin Fields has played since coming back from his injury, DJ Moore should be in for a big game.
Bottom 5, the Cardinals are. Bottom 5 are the Cardinals in receptions allowed, yards allowed, and touchdowns allowed to perimeter wide receivers, which of course is where DJ Moore lines up the majority of time. In every game in which Justin Fields has been healthy this year, DJ Moore has a north of 30% target share. He looks for number 2 early and often. It's a great matchup against Arizona. I'm at wide receiver 14 this week.
Nobody happier, fellas, than David Njoku that Joe Flacco is officially sticking around. Matthew, I mean, the numbers for Njoku with Flacco are just absurd, not to mention the matchup with Houston is beauty.
Yeah, it really is. Houston's bottom 5 in terms of most receptions and yards allowed to opposing tight ends. And you think about the 3 starts that Joe Flacco has made, and suddenly David Njoku is an elite tight end. 28 targets in those 3 starts for David Njoku. He's averaging over 19 fantasy points per game. He's got 3 touchdowns in those 3 games. He was so clutch down the stretch against Chicago as Cleveland came back to win that game. And so I'm as a top 4 play this week, and he's right up there. He's just great matchup, ton of looks, talented player. Give me David Njoku in the fantasy semifinals.
Really strong matchup. Houston, since week 7, they've been elite against the run, number 3 run defense in the NFL by EPA per play, but they've been terrible against the pass. They're a bottom 10 pass defense. And also I think the key with Flacco is that there's just not a ton of quarterbacks who can just drop back 44 times and throw. And I think for all his flaws, for the interceptions, they've shown that they will let him drop back and fling it. And that's what he's been doing. So there's just been a ton of passing volume, and Njoku really is the biggest beneficiary. It seems like they have the strongest connection. By the way, it is insane that the Browns are 9-5. It's not just that they're on their 4th quarterback. They're missing half their team. They've lost all their tackles. Yeah. Their defense is super banged up. Kevin Stefanski's starting to get some buzz for Coach of the Year. I think that's warranted. He should be in that discussion. So
I was just going to say, I feel like he's not going to win just because the Browns aren't a sexy team. Stefanski's won this award before. He's not like a media darling, but if you look at the resume, he's right there. This team has no business being 9-5.
Also, it's not like they've beaten up on a pretty bad schedule. Kevin Stefanski had PJ Walker and beat the Niners.
Right.
Like he's beaten a ton of good teams. He went into Baltimore and won that game with Deshaun Watson having a fractured shoulder and a high ankle sprain in the second half, going 14 for 14. Like they have some quality wins, and they just seem to gut these games out. They make the right decisions. He's aggressive on fourth down, great play designer. He's done a fantastic job.
He's doing it with the quarterback that literally was on his couch a month ago, and you know a lot of people want to mention he's done it with 4 different quarterbacks, as you mentioned. He loses his starting quarterback. The offensive line's been beat up. The defense has been beat up. Oh, by the way, Nick Chubb has been out this entire year for the most part. Like that's his best player.
Yep.
I mean that's the best.
We forget about that because it was in week
so
2
long
or
ago,
whatever,
exactly. But like Nick Chubb is just a massive part of any offense. Like he's one of the best running backs, pure running backs in football, if not the best. And so to lose even a player of that caliber, let alone your starting quarterback, and you know they don't really have. I mean, he's done a terrific job. There's no question about it.
Yep. And there's a chance like they're favorites in this game because CJ Stroud is out. It's trending towards 3. Then they play in primetime Thursday night next week.
Jets. They'll be
the New York
favored.
Jets.
Yeah.
It's going to be Simeon or Wilson, whoever's left. The Browns will be 6 to potentially even 7-point favorites in that game. If they win those 2 to go 11-5 and clinch the playoffs, like it's an amazing season they're having in Cleveland.
Unbelievable.
And that's why David Njoku comes in as tight end 4, but right behind him is Trey McBride at tight end 5 here, Jay. We thought Hollywood Brown would be the big beneficiary of Kyler Murray's return. It's been Trey McBride.
It has been, and he showed that he was able to produce even against the vaunted 49er defense. And I think, to your point, Connor, he's the big beneficiary of Hollywood Brown is not happening. It just hasn't happened at all with Kyler Murray. We thought that Brown would explode in the second half of the season. That's not happened. Instead, Trey McBride has been the beneficiary, and I think he's going to be an elite tight end option for a couple of years yet.
I think it'll be a real debate next year in dynasty formats whether Laporta or Trey McBride go 1 or 2. I mean, among tight ends in dynasty formats, Hawkinson will be in the mix as well. But McBride and Laporta in startup dynasty next year, I think those guys, it's probably going to be Laporta and McBride. But look, Hollywood Brown, I think, hasn't been healthy. He's been sort of gutting through stuff. He hasn't played a full complement of snaps. He's just not healthy. But since week 8, Trey McBride has 4 different games with at least 8 receptions and 80 yards. Kelsey and Hawkinson this entire year have 4 such games combined. Think about that. Since week 8, 4 different games that are 8 for 80. Kelsey and Hawkinson on this entire year have combined for 4 games of 8 and 80. That's just how good Trey McBride has been. Tight ends that see at least 6 targets against the Bears, averaging over 15 points per game. Since Kyler Murray returned, Trey McBride is the #1 tight end in fantasy football. He's my tight end 5 this week.
Couple others receiving votes. Calvin Ridley, Jordan Addison coming off a monster week. Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, Darren Waller, and Pat Freiermuth, who is now looking healthy, fortunately. Barry, who jumps out on this list for you?
Well, let's talk about Calvin Ridley because that should have a little bit of an asterisk. I'm assuming that Trevor Lawrence is going to clear the concussion protocol and be active for this game against the Buccaneers. If he were out, I certainly would feel less good about the Jaguars' passing attack. But with Zay Jones banged up and no Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley now has a 27.5% target share in the last 2 games. Buccaneers have allowed the 2nd most yards and 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I'm at wide receiver 24. Jordan Addison, look, I know the touchdowns last week were a little fluky, but over the last 4 weeks, Lions bottom 10 in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. Nick Mullins has a little bit of effort. I'm going to throw it wherever to his game. The one place you can attack the Jets is the slot. We've talked about this because Reed and Gardner are so good on the perimeter. So Curtis Samuel, who's had a nice kind of run here, 26% target share of the past 3 weeks. He comes in at wide receiver 36 for me. Tyler Boyd, we've talked about this, by the way, during the commercial break. It's official. Jamar Chase officially not going to play on Sunday for the Bengals. Zach Taylor announcing he has been ruled out. So Tyler Boyd gets more opportunity with Chase out. There's a 27% target share that's up for grabs. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, to the slot this year, allow the 5th most yards. Obviously, Boyd plays the majority of his snaps out of the slot. Freiermuth, we've talked about this. Like, the Bengals are bad against tight ends. And so even though it's going to be Mason Rudolph under center, that's another thing that came in during the break. Kenny Pickett officially ruled out, so it will be Mason Rudolph under center for Pittsburgh on Saturday, right here on NBC and Peacock. Tune in for that. Browning, Rudolph. It doesn't get better than that for December football. But listen, you're a degenerate. You're going to have fantasy playoffs and betting on the line. You're watching anyway. Let's be clear. 34% target share when these teams played in week number 12. He went 9 for 120 against the Bengals. And Darren Waller should have a really nice matchup against the Eagles. Tight ends that have seen at least 6 targets against Philly are averaging over 16 fantasy points per game.
We move to the hate list here, Jay, headlined by Terry McLaurin, who's got a trip to MetLife on Christmas Eve against either Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed. We saw Reed struggle against Waddle last week, but the bottom line is the Jets' perimeter corners have shut down a lot of wide receivers this year.
Yeah, seems like TJ Reed was unwell during the week as well. And look, Terry McLaurin got right against the Rams. A lot of that was garbage time, though. And I just think that against those two boundary corners, probably the best combo of boundary corners in the NFL in Reed and Sauce, it's going to be tough sledding for Terry.
Garbage time with Jacoby Brissett because in the last 4 games with Sam Howell under center, he's averaging 6.4 fantasy points per game. I don't want to risk it in the fantasy playoffs. He's my wide receiver 34. We talked a lot about the Bengals Steelers game. Deontay Johnson also makes the hate list, Connor. He's my wide receiver 35. Look, Mason Rudolph, kind of have to say it there as well. I also think touchdown regression. The fantasy production from him has come from the touchdown. He's had 6 straight games with 4 or fewer receptions. So, in essence, 40% of his fantasy production over the last 3 weeks have come from touchdowns. If you think he gets into the end zone, you should start him. But odds say he doesn't. He's my wide receiver 35.
Our next one here, Adam Thielen, Matthew, against the Packers. Just makes it into the top 40 wide receivers, but this offense in Carolina is going nowhere fast.
He's averaging 45 yards per game with 0 touchdowns since week 6. And over that stretch, he's wide receiver 47 on a points per game basis. Don't love the matchup either. He's my wide receiver 38.
Our final one, Jay, Dalton Kincaid, who's been a little banged up. He's got the Chargers. I mean, since Dawson Knox has been back, surprisingly, Kincaid's production has gone down.
That hurts. Also hurts that they are north of 12-point favorites against the Chargers, and they just had the best rushing game of Josh Allen's entire career. So I suspect they'll continue to lean on the run when they are leading.
Last thing, by the way, as bad as the Chargers have been in almost every aspect of football, they're actually pretty good against the tight end over the last month. They're allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So Kincaid, whose production has definitely dropped with Dawson Knox back, he's outside my top 10 this week. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.